What's up, guys? Ron from Rohde Law, and we're going to talk about the Trump indictment. Okay, this just came out. They indicted Trump and 18 of his co-defendants. There's really a lot to unpack, but I'm going to live stream basically going down this live indictment from Fulton Superior Court. Just came out yesterday. It's got a ton and ton of information in it, but we're going to go down just really from the beginning so that I can explain what some of these charges mean. What does it mean for Trump and his campaign? And what are the differences in Georgia now as a state indictment versus federal, and his ability to pardon himself if he ever does get convicted and he also manages to win the presidency, which I will say right now, it's probably looking pretty good because there are so many Democrats out there saying anybody but Biden. And unfortunately, they're going to abstain from voting and Trump's going to win the nomination. So, really interesting to see how, if he gets convicted in this Georgia case, he's going to indict himself or pardon himself for the federal offenses. But what is going to happen with this state possible conviction? So, state of Georgia, they list all the grand jurors here. You've got Robert Wells as a foreperson, Ashley Melvin as the assistant. They struck some of these people who may have been removed from the grand jury panel. Could happen for any number of reasons. Let's start with count one, violation of the Georgia RICO Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act. So, for a little bit of background for RICO, this is a federal law, this is a state law. Basically, it was introduced, for mobsters and anybody who was conspiring with other people to commit crimes. They created and they passed this law to specifically target people that they knew were discussing and planning certain crimes, but they weren't necessarily the people doing it, right? So if we get together and say, hey, you're going to go do a drive-by and kill this person, they're never the ones pulling the trigger. But these types of RICO acts are ways to get them in on conspiracy, but a much broader term. So acts of racketeering and overt acts in furtherance of the conspiracy, you've got to actually do something, not just talk about it. We have solicitation of violation of oath by public officer. This was related to the election official trying to get him to find the votes he needed to win. Lots of false statements, impersonating a public officer, forgery in the first degree, false statements, more false statements, criminal attempt to commit influencing witnesses. And again, we have 41 counts here. They threw in a perjury just for good measure. And here we can see all the people indicted: Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, John Charles Eastman. These are some attorneys: Chesborough, Jenna Lynn. Who else is here? Schaefer, Travian Cuddy. So this is a celebrity hairstylist that was able to coordinate a meeting with one of these local officials. Super interesting in the wide range of people that they really threw under this net, and it took them 3 years to finalize all this information and charge all these people. So we have an introduction here. Defendant Donald John Trump lost the United States presidential election held on November 3rd. One of the states he lost was Georgia. Trump and the other defendants charged in this refused to accept that Trump lost, and they knowingly and willfully joined a conspiracy to change the outcome of the election in favor of Trump. So these are always very biased. I mean, I don't want to read too much into it. It is sensational and it does kind of come out and attack them, but that's kind of the purpose of this introduction, is to set the stage for these charges. So they describe the enterprise here. They list all the people filing false documents. It's a criminal They accuse them of being a criminal organization. They had connections and relationships with one another. I really think that when we go into some of these details, we have false statements and solicitation of state legislators. They really don't go into any detail here. So this is just about their accusations, which are the conclusions, but without any evidence. They don't provide any specifics. Harassment and intimidation of Fulton County election worker Ruby Freeman. These accusations accused her to state legislators. They traveled from out of state to harass Freeman, intimidate her, and solicit her to falsely confess. Um, Again, one instance, Donald Trump stated to the acting United States Attorney General, just say that the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman. Well, that one, if it is true or he did say that, I don't know how you can prove this statement without having attorney general testimony and then giving Trump a chance to rebut the attorney general on the stand during the trial that he said that under the circumstances and when he said that. Unlawful breach of election equipment, obstruct, these are all I think pretty minor charges. But here, now we're into the RICO charges. We have some specific items. 15th day of November, Rudy Giuliani placed a telephone call to a co-conspirator whose identity is known and left an 83-second long voicemail concerning fraud in Fulton County, Georgia. This is an act in furtherance of the conspiracy. I don't know. Do they have a copy of that voicemail? Did they listen to it? I would love to hear it. We've been looking into the election on behalf of the president to exchange contact information, help him as needed. So again, they've got a lot of these phone calls and voicemails. They're really tying together this conspiracy to overthrow. And again, I'm reading through these acts. They have Act 8, Act 9, Act 10. They're really all just about telephone calls. So each telephone call is an overt act that they're treating as in furtherance of the conspiracy. And that's really what's tying all these people together because they've got 18 defendants or 19 defendants. But here's one that's really a tweet. On the third day of December 2020, Trump caused to be tweeted from the Twitter account, Real Donald Trump, Georgia hearings now on OANN. Amazing. This was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. I don't know. I don't think that's going to legally stand. They can have their allegations for the indictment, but this tweet cannot nearly rise to a conspiracy, especially this particular one pointing out public information about something on a public network. No, no act I think could be interpreted that way as furthering the conspiracy, calling attention to a public event. 96,000 mail-in ballots, despite having no record of those. The Dominion mistakenly recorded 6,000 votes for Biden when they were actually cast for Donald Trump. But this was at a Senate Judiciary Subcommittee meeting. They're making false statements. Ray Stallings Smith committed a false statement by saying 2,506 felons voted illegally in the presidential election, 66,000 illegal underage people. So again, I think false statements have to really be demonstrably proven false. And even then, it's not just that if he believed them to be true, you can have a difference of opinion on what your definition of an underage person is and where did this data come from. And if you have a reputable source, the impact of having false information is really kind of mitigated. But so they go here too. Act 26, Act 27, more tweets. People in Georgia got cold, bringing in massive numbers in the ballots. Okay, great job. I think these tweets as further acts are really pretty weak. These look like just normal tweets that Trump makes or was making all the time. So more calling out Kemp. Powell entered into an agreement with Sullivan Strickler, a forensic data firm. Again, computer forensic collections. I don't know if it's lawful or not, but they're just entering into written agreements with forensic companies. So again, I think a lot of these acts on its face are really stretched for the impact. They say that they're nonpartisan. This was the DA, Williams, saying this is a nonpartisan justice. But the problem is, anytime you have a former or sitting president, the decision to indict them or the decision not to indict them is a partisan decision. And I I think it's really being disingenuous to say statements like this is completely nonpartisan when it's not true. And I think I would prefer the route to admit, say, I have some bias. I'm a father, I've got kids. I'm going to have some bias against criminals or pedophiles or do these things. And that's fine. It doesn't change the analysis or the opinions that I say, but it's better to acknowledge a little bit of your background because that's what makes people interesting and makes people different, and they should be proud of that. And we certainly hear that a lot. But to claim things that are just not true, I think it decreases your credibility. How about that? So all of these decisions are going to be partisan. It's really not credible to say that justice is always nonpartisan. We've seen that with the FBI. We've seen all of the, you know, FBI agents indicating their presidential preference, yet at the same time saying, "Look, I can have an opinion, but I can still do my job professionally," and that's okay. I would rather have that statement instead of somebody coming in and telling me that they're 100% non-biased. Well, that's really not the case. More statements, false statements. I'm skimming through all these acts because we're not getting to any details. I really want to get some nitty gritty other than general narratives, right? These read like there's no detail at all into what their basis is for making this indictment, and that they've really just done a narrative. So thousands of people attempted to vote because they could not cast a ballot. I mean, this is just something that cannot be proven true or untrue. They accuse Ruby Freeman of a professional vote scammer and a known political operative. I mean, what can you gain from that statement or false statement? You can't prove or disprove whether somebody's a professional vote scammer. Another tweet: I spoke to Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger about Fulton County. He was unwilling or unable to answer questions. That just sounds like spin. That sounds like media spin, where anytime you ask a politician or elected official for an official comment, they're going to say no comment. And then Trump spins it, say, he wouldn't answer my questions. He's obviously lying. I mean, that's just spin. Man. Well, so we've got a bunch of phone calls. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 phone calls to Cootie. But it doesn't seem like only 2 to Ruby Freeman. I don't know if that counts as harassment, but 2 unsuccessful phone calls and several phone calls over to Cootie, the celebrity hairstylist. So none of these acts really get me excited. The vice president, this is another tweet from Trump. The vice president has the power to reject fraudulently chosen electors. If that is a true statement or interpretation of the law, how is that an overt act of furtherance of conspiracy? They're going to take legal acts and now combine them and make them an illegal conspiracy. I think that's a real problem. Twitter is really a platform for free speech, and if you're saying true statements, I don't really care how they're construed. I don't think that should be interpreted, or you should be liable for a conspiracy if you're saying true statements. I don't know. I'm just spitballing off the top of my head. If I say, if you have duct tape and you do this and then you get acid to bleach it, bleach will wash fingerprints off of this or will kill any DNA. Is that an act of conspiracy? I mean, it certainly looks suspicious, and maybe it's circumstantial evidence, but I don't think that you can convict somebody based on individual statements that may or may not be true. The conspiracy acts really need to be in furtherance of a crime. So again, we have a lot more tweets where we're on count 16 of 41, going down for all the co-conspirators and really looking at false statements. Grand jurors, behalf of citizens accused Powell and Kathleen conspiracy to commit computer theft. So this is more on the forensics people. These are the people that retained the company to look at the Sullivan Strickler. Again, I don't really know enough information about that charge. So if it is tampering with a voting machine without proper authorization, that could be a problem for them. I don't think it impacts Trump per se, whether he was the big criminal genius mastermind behind all of this. I I doubt it, but I don't know. And again, this indictment does not give you enough information about how they prove these things, other than just writing out a narrative. So they've got it. Then they close with a witness list. So that's it. I mean, that's 100 pages of these nice allegations. You get a flavor of the types of events that they claim occurred, interspersed with some probably factual events that did happen, tweets that were documented, phone calls that we're not going to dispute. Phone calls were placed between this number and this number, but we don't get any meat. We don't get any meat and potatoes, no juicy details. So we're gonna wait for more information to be unsealed. Look at some of the actual charges, but the RICO charges, really has to have a conspiracy to conspire, and we have to figure out what is that criminal act, and what role did Trump really play in this relative to the other players who were, more on the execution level. They were the people picking up the phone. They were the people making statements, and they may be in more trouble than Trump, but we'll see. So that's it for this Lawyer Reacts to the Trump indictment in Georgia. Smash the like button if you're still there. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.